Imagine you're free-falling from a height of 200 meters at nearly 100 km/h, but both your main and reserve parachutes refuse to open. That was the horrifying moment Victoria Cilliers faced on Easter Sunday 2015. But what's more terrifying than that free fall is the truth that the person who orchestrated this accident was none other than the man she loved most, her own husband. Welcome to the Case Files, where we explore the most shocking cases in criminal history together. I'm your host, and today we're going to flip through the pages of a case file that has shaken the United Kingdom. Today, we're diving deep into a story about the most brutal betrayal, when love turns into hatred, when trust becomes a murder weapon. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the infamous case of the parachute murder plot, the parachute murder conspiracy. This is the story of Victoria Cilliers, a woman who miraculously escaped death twice from the hands of her perfect husband. Main characters: a seemingly perfect marriage. Victoria Cilliers, 40 years old, was a talented physiotherapist working for the British Ministry of Defence, but her true passion was the blue sky and the feeling of freedom when skydiving. With over 2,054 jumps of experience, Victoria wasn't just an excellent athlete, but also a respected skydiving instructor. Emile Cilliers, 38 years old, born in South Africa, was a sergeant in the Royal Army Physical Training Corps. They met in 2009, married in 2011, and had 2 children together. On the surface, they were a model military family. But could anyone have suspected that behind this perfect facade, Emile was secretly weaving a complex web of lies? Plan A: the deadly fire in the night. The story doesn't begin in the sky, but right in their own home. On the night of March 29, 2015, while Victoria and their 2 children were deep in sleep, Emile snuck into the kitchen with a pair of pliers in his hand. He carefully damaged the valve on the gas pipe, creating a dangerous leak. Emile's plan was simple but vicious. The next morning, when Victoria woke up and did her usual activities, like turning on the stove, microwave, or simply flipping a light switch, even a small spark would be enough to turn their house into a giant fireball. To create the perfect alibi, Emile told his wife he would stay at the barracks to sleep to avoid traffic the next morning. It sounded like a reasonable excuse that no one could suspect. But what happened when Victoria woke up? The next morning, Victoria detected the strong smell of gas throughout the house. She immediately called and texted her husband. Emile's response through text messages later became one of the most chilling pieces of evidence against him. He casually instructed his wife on how to check the stove, an action that could have killed her instantly. In a message full of dark humor, Victoria asked her husband, "Are you trying to kill me?" This unintentional question was actually the truth she had no idea about. Luck smiled on Victoria. She was alert enough not to do anything that could create a spark. Emile's plan A failed miserably, but he didn't give up. In his mind, another plan, more sophisticated and cruel, was brewing. Criminal motive: sex, money, and ultimate selfishness. Why would a man want to kill his wife instead of divorcing her? The answer lies in the double life Emile had woven over many years. Emile was having an extramarital affair with Stephanie Goller, a woman he met through the dating app Tinder. To seduce Stephanie, he created a completely fabricated story. Victoria was a controlling, unfaithful wife, and their second daughter wasn't his biological child. Emile even forged DNA test results to prove his lies. He promised he would soon divorce to start a new life with Stephanie. But there was a problem. Emile was drowning in debt of over $22,000. He had been continuously withdrawing money from Victoria's account, spending on prostitutes, and taking his mistress on luxurious vacations. A divorce would be an absolute financial disaster. But Victoria's death? That would be a perfect solution. It would not only free him from the unwanted marriage, but also bring in $120,000, equivalent to $160,000 USD from the life insurance policy. With this money, he could pay off all his debts and start a wealthy new life with his mistress. Did Victoria know that her marriage was only being valued by a number? Plan B, the death gift from the sky. After the gas conspiracy failed, Emile knew he had to act quickly, and this time he came up with a more brilliant plan. Emile suggested giving Victoria a skydiving session so she could return to her passion after a long break from childbirth. This was a perfect move. It showed the care of a good husband while hitting Victoria's greatest passion, making her unsuspecting. On April 5, 2015, Easter Sunday, Victoria arrived at Netheravon Airfield extremely excited. The sky was clear blue, the weather was favorable. Everything was perfect for a beautiful jump. At the airfield, Emile volunteered to help his wife carry the parachute bag, saying he wanted to help her store her equipment. It was a sweet gesture that touched Victoria, but she didn't know that Emile had taken the parachute bag into the bathroom and performed the final sabotage. He removed the connecting links, slinks, extremely important metal components used to connect the parachute lines to the safety harness, from both the main and reserve parachutes. These were technical details that only someone with expertise could perform so professionally. Emile knew well that with a fall from over 200 meters without a parachute, his wife's chance of survival would be absolutely zero. The moment of destiny, when the sky becomes the enemy. When the plane reached an altitude of 1,220 meters, 4,000 feet, Victoria was the last person in the group preparing to jump. She checked her equipment one last time, fist-bumped her teammates in friendly camaraderie, then stepped out of the plane door. The first 3 seconds of free fall were still wonderful as always. Victoria spread her arms, felt the powerful airflow, stabilized her position. At the right moment, she pulled the cord to deploy the main parachute. But instead of the familiar jolt of the parachute catching wind, she only saw a tangle of parachute lines, twisted in a strange way. Victoria began falling at an increasingly fast speed. 28 years of skydiving experience immediately kicked in. She stayed calm, tried to untangle the lines, but it was completely useless. The free fall speed had reached nearly 100 km/h. With no other choice, Victoria performed the emergency procedure, cut away the main parachute, and deploy the reserve. This was the last resort, the life preserver that every skydiver trusts absolutely. But once again, terrifying silence enveloped her. The reserve parachute also refused to open. Victoria was plummeting straight toward the ground at a horrifying speed. From below, teammates watched in horror as a small dot with human form crashed into a nearby field. They screamed in desperation, certain that no miracle could save Victoria after such a fall. For and through the miracle and the horrifying truth. The first people to arrive at the scene even brought a body bag, completely prepared mentally for the worst sight. But a miracle had truly happened. Victoria landed in a field that had just been plowed. The soft soil absorbed a large portion of the terrible impact force. When teammates ran over, they were stunned to see her still alive, eyes still open, and she could even move her arms and legs to signal. Victoria was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Broken pelvis, multiple broken ribs, lung damage, and 2 vertebrae injuries. But she had survived. Throughout Victoria's hospitalization, Emile presented himself as an exemplary husband. He stayed by her bedside, appearing worried and deeply distressed. Victoria, despite her pain, still felt comforted having her devoted husband beside her. But there was a detail Victoria didn't know. As soon as she was admitted to the hospital, Emile had brought accident insurance forms for the doctor to sign and confirm. He even sat by her hospital bed, counting each of his wife's broken bones, because each fracture would be compensated 1,000 teuero. He didn't even say he loved me, Victoria later told police. He just sat there counting my fractures. Meanwhile, Emile was still secretly texting his mistress, Stephanie, right beside his wife's hospital bed. Suspicion and investigation. At Netheravon Airfield, Mark Bayada, a head instructor with many years of experience, immediately examined Victoria's parachute equipment. He discovered something horrifying. The important connecting links had disappeared from both the main and reserve parachutes. This cannot be a technical error or natural wear, Mark Bayada affirmed to police. Someone deliberately sabotaged this parachute. This is a murder conspiracy. Initially, police were skeptical. They found no strange fingerprints or DNA on the equipment. But a technical report from the British Parachute Association confirmed this was intentional sabotage. At the same time, one of Victoria's close friends called to provide earth-shattering information. Emile was having an extramarital affair and wanted to divorce to be with his mistress. Nearly a month after the accident, when Victoria had just been discharged from the hospital, police came to Emile's workplace and arrested him on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. Victoria was completely shocked. She called police, protesting vehemently and insisting her husband was innocent. She couldn't believe, and didn't want to believe, that the man she loved wholeheartedly could be so ruthless as to want to take her life. The trial and psychological warfare. In October 2017, the trial of Emile Cilliers at Winchester Crown Court began. This wasn't just an ordinary criminal case, but a complex psychological battle. The prosecution presented a series of undeniable evidence: the professionally sabotaged parachute, Emile's DNA on the gas valve, thousands of romantic text messages with his mistress, financial motive from debts, and life insurance policies. Faced with this evidence, Emile and his legal team put forward a bold defense strategy. He not only denied all charges, but also did a complete 180-degree turn, making the victim the perpetrator. Emile claimed Victoria had sabotaged the parachute herself for suicide due to postpartum depression, or suggested some third party had harmed his wife. But the most anticipated witness was actually the person who caused the greatest difficulty for the prosecution: Victoria Cilliers. Standing before the court, Victoria was in an extremely complex psychological position. For many years, Emile had continuously manipulated and eroded her confidence. Victoria's testimony was full of contradictions. She frequently downplayed the severity of incidents she had previously reported to police. She even lied to protect the man who had tried to kill her, insisting she didn't believe Emile was guilty and still loved him. However, the jury was instructed to focus on objective evidence, and evidence doesn't know how to lie. In May 2018, after 2 trials, the jury reached their final decision. Emile Cilliers was convicted of 3 charges: 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of criminal damage endangering life. Judge Justice Sweeney said during sentencing that Emile was utterly callous and a serious danger to society. Emile Cilliers was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 18 years before being considered for parole. Rising from the ashes, the journey to find herself again. The court's verdict had put an end to the marriage, but opened a new chapter in Victoria's life. Having to face all the evidence presented publicly in court, though painful, was actually the antidote to years of manipulation. Victoria cut off all contact with Emile, who still wrote letters from prison claiming his innocence. She filed for divorce and began the journey of rebuilding her life. She wrote a book titled "I Survived" to tell her story, not as a blind victim, but as a strong survivor, a warrior who had overcome adversity. And in a deeply symbolic act, Victoria Cilliers returned to the sky. She continued skydiving. The sport her husband had used as a weapon to kill her now became a symbol of her freedom and rebirth. The sky was no longer a place of betrayal, but once again became a space of passion, where she found herself again after that fateful fall years ago. Conclusion. The Victoria Cilliers case isn't just a story about crime, but also a profound lesson about the strength of the human spirit. It shows that even when facing the most brutal betrayal from the person you love most, humans can still rise up, overcome, and find the light of life again. Victoria's story is also a warning about the signs of toxic relationships and psychological manipulation. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are those closest to us, those we trust completely. Victoria's journey from victim to strong survivor is proof that no tragedy, no matter how terrible, can completely destroy the human will to live and desire for happiness. Thank you for listening to the Case Files today. If this story has touched your heart, please share it with friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other intriguing cases. And remember, sometimes the truth is more horrifying than imagination, but it's that truth that will set us free. See you again in the next episode of the Case Files.